The dust-laden wind carried the scent of desperation as Clara Parker stood on the edge of Willow Creek, her future hanging as precariously as the dilapidated sign above the town's only saloon. It was 1878, and she had traveled 3 days by stagecoach with nothing but her mother's wedding ring, $20 sewn into her petticoat, and the weight of responsibility crushing her shoulders. "I need a husband," she whispered to herself, fingers tightening around the telegram that had brought her here. The yellow paper, crumpled from constant reading, contained the news of her father's death and the substantial debt he'd left behind. Clara had exactly 1 month to save the family ranch in Kansas before the bank seized everything. The main street of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, stretched before her like a path to purgatory. Men in worn hats and mud-caked boots moved about their business, paying her little mind. Women were scarce in these parts, but Clara wasn't looking for attention, she was looking for salvation. She adjusted her simple blue travel dress and lifted her chin. Her plan was simple if desperate. Find a man willing to marry her in name only, use his name to secure a loan to save her family's ranch, and then part ways. She had drafted an advertisement for the town board, offering a business arrangement that would benefit a man looking for certain government land grants only available to married settlers. As Clara made her way toward the general store to post her notice, a commotion erupted from the saloon. The batwing doors burst open, and a man came sailing through them, landing unceremoniously in the dirt street. He was followed by a burly, red-faced man who stood in the doorway, pointing a meaty finger. "Don't come back until you've learned to play fair, Valentine," the saloon keeper bellowed. The man in the dirt Valentine sat up slowly, adjusting his hat which had somehow remained on his head. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and the kind of face that spoke of both hardship and humor. Clara couldn't help but stare as he dusted himself off with a strange dignity that seemed at odds with his circumstance. "I believe you're confusing skill with cheating, Morris," Valentine called back, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Not my fault you can't tell the difference." Clara found herself frozen in place as the man called Valentine stood to his full height, revealing broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. He turned, catching her gaze, and she was struck by eyes the color of a summer storm gray with hints of blue around the edges. "Enjoying the show, miss?" he asked with a half-smile that somehow wasn't insolent. Clara straightened her spine. "I was simply concerned for your well-being, sir. That appeared to be quite a fall." "Valentine Xavier," he said with a slight bow that seemed both mocking and genuine. "And I've had worse falls from my horse before breakfast." "Clara Parker," she replied, wondering why she was even speaking to this man who'd just been thrown out of a saloon. "If you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." She tried to step past him, but his next words stopped her cold. "Business unusual for a lady traveling alone, I'd wager, especially one clutching a telegram like it might turn to dust." Clara's hand instinctively tightened around the paper. "My affairs are my own, Mr. Xavier." His eyes softened unexpectedly. In a town this size, everyone's affairs become everyone's business by sundown. Whatever trouble you're in, you might want a friend. "I need a husband, not a friend," she replied sharply, then immediately regretted her candor. Valentine Xavier's eyebrows shot up, and for a moment he simply stared at her. Then, to her surprise, he laughed not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. "Well, that's the most straightforward proposal I've ever received," he said, leaning against a hitching post. "Care to elaborate?" Clara glanced around, noting the curious glances from passers-by. "Not in the middle of the street, Mr. Xavier." "Call me Val," he said, gesturing toward the hotel across the way. They serve a decent coffee and you look like you could use some." Against her better judgment, Clara found herself following this stranger into the hotel's small dining room. As they settled at a corner table, she studied him more carefully. His clothing was worn but clean, his gun belt positioned for easy access, but not ostentatiously displayed like those of men trying to appear dangerous. Most notably, his hands bore calluses that spoke of honest work, not just gambling. "I need a husband in name," Clara explained after they'd been served coffee. She laid out her predicament in brisk, business-like terms: the ranch, the debt, the looming foreclosure. Val listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, he took a slow sip of his coffee. "You'll have one in heart," he said quietly, surprising her. Clara blinked. "I beg your pardon. If I agree to this arrangement," Val explained, setting down his cup, "I won't do it halfway. Where I come from, even business arrangements demand a certain integrity." "You misunderstand," Clara insisted. "This would be a temporary arrangement. Once the ranch is secured—" "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "But I'd still be your husband, on paper or otherwise, and I don't take such things lightly." Clara studied him, perplexed. "Why would you even consider this?" "You don't know me." Val shrugged, his gray-blue eyes holding hers. "Perhaps I have my own reasons for needing a wife. Such as a past I'd rather leave behind and a future that needs reshaping." He leaned forward. "You're not the only one running from something, Miss Parker." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you a criminal, Mr. Xavier?" His laugh was short and without humor. "Nothing so interesting. Just a man who's worn out his welcome in too many places." He paused. "What I am is a man who knows ranching. I've worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana. I can mend fences, break horses, and keep books better than most." "You're a cowboy," Clara said, as if this explained everything. "Among other things." Clara considered him carefully. This was not how she'd imagined her plan unfolding. She'd expected to find some aging settler looking for a convenient arrangement, not this complex man with storm-colored eyes who spoke of marriage with unexpected reverence. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally. Val's expression turned serious. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Parker. Even you, even me." There was something in his voice that resonated with Clara, a sincerity that cut through her defenses. She'd come to Willow Creek prepared to make a cold business transaction, but Val Xavier was offering something different, something that felt dangerously like hope. "I need time to consider," she said, rising from the table. Val stood as well, towering over her. "Time is the one luxury you don't seem to have, Miss Parker, but take what you need." He placed a coin on the table for their coffee. "I'll be at the livery stable if you make up your mind. I work there evenings in exchange for board." As Clara watched him walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that fate had just dealt her a hand she hadn't expected. Whether it was a winning hand remained to be seen. Clara spent the afternoon walking the perimeter of Willow Creek, weighing her options. The town wasn't large: a church, general store, 2 saloons, the hotel, a bank, and various businesses catering to the surrounding ranches and the occasional traveler. By supper time, she'd made 3 complete circuits and attracted curious glances from the locals. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "When the path isn't clear, Clara girl, stop walking and start thinking." James Parker had been a good man but a poor businessman, more interested in breeding fine horses than managing money. After her mother's death 5 years ago, he'd thrown himself into expanding the ranch, taking loans he couldn't repay. Now Clara was left to salvage what remained of their legacy. She'd promised her mother on her deathbed that she'd keep the family land. It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter the cost. The livery stable sat at the edge of town, the scent of hay and horses a comforting familiarity. Clara hesitated at the wide doors, then stepped inside. The dim interior was punctuated by lantern light, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. "Mr. Xavier," she called. A horse nickered from a nearby stall, and then Val emerged from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd changed into a clean shirt, though his vest and hat remained the same. "Miss Parker," he acknowledged. "Decision made." Clara took a deep breath. "I have conditions." The corner of Val's mouth twitched. "As do I. Shall we compare notes?" "This arrangement will last exactly 1 year," Clara began. "I need time to get the ranch profitable again. Once the debt is cleared, we dissolve the marriage and go our separate ways." Val nodded slowly. "Fair enough. My condition is that while we're married, we present a unified front. No one, and I mean no one, can know this is merely an arrangement." Clara frowned. "Why?" "Because in a territory where men outnumber women 5 to 1, a marriage of convenience would draw unwanted attention. Attention neither of us wants, I suspect." He had a point, though Clara was reluctant to admit it. "What else?" "I come with you to Kansas. I work the ranch alongside you. My knowledge and labor in exchange for your name and the fresh start it provides." Clara narrowed her eyes. "What exactly are you running from, Mr. Xavier?" Val's expression darkened momentarily. "Nothing illegal, if that's your concern. Just a reputation I'd rather leave behind. Being known as a gambler doesn't open many doors, and I'm looking to change professions permanently." "And if I agree to this, you expect us to live as—" "What exactly?" Val's gaze was steady. "As partners, Miss Parker. I won't demand the rights of a husband beyond your comfort, but I will expect to be treated with the respect a partner deserves." Clara considered his words carefully. "And after the year is up, if you wish me gone, I'll go. No arguments, no claims on the property." It seemed too simple, too easy. "I'll need that in writing." Val smiled slightly. "Already prepared." He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document. "Had the town lawyer draw it up this afternoon. It states our arrangement in plain language, minus the marriage in name only part. To anyone reading it, it simply looks like a standard property agreement between husband and wife." Clara took the paper, surprised by his foresight. "You were confident I'd agree." "I was hopeful," he corrected. "There's a difference." As Clara read the document, she found it straightforward and fair. Val would contribute his labor and expertise to restoring the ranch to profitability. In exchange, he would receive room, board, and a small percentage of any profits after the debt was cleared, but no claim to the land itself. "This seems equitable," she admitted reluctantly. "I'm not looking to take advantage, Miss Parker, just seeking a fresh start, same as you." Clara studied him, trying to reconcile the gambling cowboy who'd been thrown from a saloon with this reasonable man presenting a carefully crafted agreement. "Why were you thrown out of the saloon earlier?" Val sighed. "Caught a man cheating at cards, called him on it. He had friends, I didn't." "You don't strike me as a man without friends. Let's just say I've learned to travel light in all respects." He nodded toward the paper in her hands. "Do we have an agreement?" Clara took a deep breath. This wasn't how she'd planned things, but then again, nothing had gone according to plan since receiving that telegram. "We'll need to be married quickly. The stagecoach leaves tomorrow morning." Val nodded. "The preacher lives behind the church. I suspect he'd be willing to perform the ceremony tonight for a suitable donation." Tonight, Clara's heart raced. This was happening too quickly, as if sensing her panic, Val's expression softened. "Unless you need more time," Clara straightened her shoulders. "No, tonight is fine. I'll need to change first. I'll fetch the preacher." "Meet at the church in an hour," she nodded, suddenly unable to form words. Valentine Xavier was about to become her husband. Even if it was just on paper, the thought was overwhelming. An hour later, Clara stood in the small church wearing her best dress, a dark green traveling outfit that had belonged to her mother. She'd pinned her hair up more carefully and even dabbed a bit of rose water behind her ears, a gesture that felt silly given the circumstances. The church was empty save for the preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Thompson, and his wife who had agreed to serve as witness. Val stood at the altar, wearing the same clothes but with his hat respectfully removed, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Are you certain about this, my dear?" Reverend Thompson asked Clara quietly. "Marriage is not a step to be taken lightly." Clara glanced at Val, whose expression revealed nothing. "I'm certain, Reverend." The ceremony was brief and to the point. They exchanged simple vows, promising to honor and respect one another, careful omissions that neither of them remarked upon. When it came time for the ring, Val surprised Clara by producing a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he explained quietly as he slid it onto her finger. "Consider it borrowed until you can return to using your own." Clara nodded, touched despite herself by the gesture. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Val leaned forward and placed the lightest of kisses on her cheek, his hand gentle at her elbow. "Mrs. Xavier," he said softly, and Clara felt an unexpected shiver run through her at the sound of her new name. They thanked the Reverend and his wife and stepped out into the night. The stars were bright overhead, the town quiet save for the distant piano music from the saloon. "I've taken a room at the hotel," Clara said stiffly. "I assume you'll continue staying at the livery tonight." Val studied her face in the moonlight. "That would be best. We leave at first light," Clara nodded. "The stage coach departs at 6. "Then I'll bid you good night, Mrs. Xavier." He gave a slight bow and turned to leave. "Mr. Xavier," Clara called after him, causing him to pause. "Thank you for understanding the arrangement." Val's smile was barely visible in the darkness. "Get some rest, Clara. Tomorrow begins a new chapter for us both." As she watched him walk away, Clara wondered what exactly she had gotten herself into and why. Despite the strictly business nature of their arrangement, her heart was beating so quickly in her chest. The stagecoach journey to Kansas was long and grueling. For 4 days, Clara and Val sat side by side in the cramped coach, their bodies swaying and jostling with every rut in the road. They shared the space with a traveling salesman and an elderly couple heading to visit their daughter, which meant maintaining the pretense of newlyweds. Val played his part admirably, offering Clara the more comfortable seat, making sure she ate when they stopped for meals, and generally treating her with the attentive courtesy of a new husband. If their fellow passengers noticed anything amiss in their relationship, they gave no indication. On the second night, while staying at a way station, the elderly woman, Mrs. Whittaker, cornered Clara while they washed up for dinner. "What a handsome husband you have, my dear," she said, her eyes twinkling. "And so attentive. You're a fortunate young woman." Clara managed a smile. "Thank you. We haven't been married long." "That much is obvious," Mrs. Whittaker chuckled. "The way you both stiffen whenever your hands accidentally touch, pure newlywed awkwardness. My Henry and I were the same way 50 years ago." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Is it that noticeable?" "Only to an old woman who's seen it all before." Mrs. Whittaker patted her arm. "Don't worry, dear. The awkwardness fades. The good marriages turn that initial discomfort into something comfortable and true." Clara nodded noncommittally, unsure how to respond to advice that didn't apply to her situation. Yet as they continued their journey, she found herself watching Val more closely, noticing small details she'd overlooked before. The way he instinctively placed himself between her and strangers when they stopped at stations. How he seemed to know when she was thirsty, offering her the canteen before she asked. The careful distance he maintained, respecting her space while still playing the role of attentive husband. By the third day, Clara had developed a crick in her neck from trying to sleep upright. Without comment, Val had gently guided her head to rest on his shoulder. She'd stiffened initially, then relaxed as exhaustion overcame propriety. "Rest," he'd murmured. "We still have a long way to go." When Clara woke hours later, she found Val's coat draped over her as a makeshift blanket, while he gazed out the window at the passing landscape, seemingly untroubled by her weight against his shoulder. On the afternoon of the fourth day, the stagecoach finally rolled into Silver Springs, Kansas, the nearest town to the Parker Ranch. Clara's heart pounded as familiar buildings came into view. This was home, or had been, until her father's passing. "We'll need to rent a wagon to reach the ranch," she told Val as they collected their luggage. "It's about 10 miles outside of town." Val nodded, scanning the main street with the alert gaze of a man assessing new territory. "I'll see to it. Is there anything else we need before heading out?" Clara hesitated. "I should stop by the bank. Mr. Hargrove was handling my father's estate. I need to inform him of our marriage." Val's expression turned serious. "Would you prefer I come with you or handle the wagon on my own?" The consideration in his question surprised Clara. "Come with me," she decided. "Mr. Hargrove should meet my husband." They made their way to the Silver Springs Bank and Trust, a sturdy brick building in the center of town. Inside, Clara asked to see Mr. Hargrove and was promptly shown to his office. Arnold Hargrove was a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression that deepened when he saw Clara. "Miss Parker," he began, then corrected himself. "I mean, Mrs. Parker. I wasn't expecting you back so soon. I'm afraid the situation with your father's debts remains unchanged." "Actually, it's Mrs. Xavier now," Clara said, gesturing to Val, who stood beside her. "Mr. Hargrove, this is my husband, Valentine Xavier." Hargrove's eyebrows shot up as he shook Val's hand. "Husband, when did this happen? We were married 4 days ago in Montana Territory," Clara explained. "Valentine has extensive experience in ranching. We've come to settle my father's affairs and restore the ranch to profitability." Hargrove looked skeptical. "The debt is substantial, Mrs. Xavier, nearly $1,500. The bank is prepared to foreclose at the end of the month if payment arrangements can't be made." Val stepped forward. "Mr. Hargrove, my wife and I understand the situation. We're prepared to make an initial payment today and arrange terms for the remainder." Clara glanced at Val in surprise. This wasn't part of their discussion. Val reached into his vest and withdrew a small pouch, counting out several gold coins onto Hargrove's desk. $300 as a show of good faith. We'll pay the remaining $1,200 over the next 12 months with interest." Hargrove's eyes widened as he counted the money. "This is unexpected. Where did this come from?" "My savings," Val said simply. "I've been working cattle drives for years, Mr. Hargrove. Unlike some men, I don't drink or gamble away my earnings." Clara stared at the money, then at Val. He had never mentioned having savings, let alone enough to make a substantial payment on her father's debt. Their agreement had been that she would secure a loan using their marriage as leverage. Hargrove's demeanor changed dramatically. "Well, this certainly changes matters. I believe the bank can accept these terms with proper documentation, of course." Val nodded. "Draw up the papers. We'll sign them now." As Hargrove busied himself with the paperwork, Clara turned to Val, speaking in a low voice. "You never mentioned having money." Val's expression remained neutral. "You never asked. Besides, it's an investment in our arrangement. The sooner the debt is cleared, the sooner the ranch can turn a profit." "I'll pay you back," Clara said firmly. Every cent. Something flickered in Val's eyes, perhaps amusement, perhaps something else. As you wish, Mrs. Xavier. After signing the loan documents, they left the bank and arranged for a wagon and supplies. By late afternoon, they were heading toward the Parker ranch, the wagon loaded with provisions for the coming weeks. Clara sat beside Val on the wagon seat, still processing the events at the bank. "Thank you," she said finally. "For the money. It wasn't part of our agreement." Val kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Consider it a wedding gift." Clara studied his profile, trying to reconcile this man with the gambling cowboy she'd met in Montana. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Xavier." "Val," he corrected gently. "If we're to convince people we're truly married, you should probably use my given name." "Val," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "You're not what I expected." He glanced at her then, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Neither are you, Clara, neither are you." As they crested the final hill, the Parker ranch came into view. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure built by Clara's grandfather 30 years earlier. Several outbuildings surrounded it, a barn, stables, a bunkhouse for hired hands, and various sheds and coops. Fields stretched beyond, once filled with cattle and horses, now noticeably emptier. "Home," Clara said softly, emotions welling in her throat. It had been nearly 6 months since she'd left to teach at a school in Denver, trying to earn extra money to help her father. She'd received the news of his death by telegram, along with the dire financial situation he'd left behind. Val drew the wagon to a halt in front of the house. "It's a fine spread," he said, his gaze taking in the property with an experienced eye. "Good water source, decent grazing land." "Your father had a good eye for property." "It was my grandfather who chose it," Clara explained as they climbed down from the wagon. "My father was more interested in horses than cattle. He was breeding quarter horses before." She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Val nodded in understanding and began unloading their bags from the wagon. The house was dusty, but otherwise in good condition. Clara moved through the familiar rooms, memories washing over her with each step. Her father's pipe still sat in its holder by his reading chair. Her mother's sewing basket remained in its place by the window, untouched since her death. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," Clara told Val as he brought in their luggage. "You can take my father's room. I'll stay in mine." Val set the bags down in the front hall. "I can sleep in the bunkhouse if that would make you more comfortable." Clara shook her head. "People would talk. The nearest neighbor is only 2 miles away and news travels fast in these parts. We need to maintain appearances." Val nodded. "As you wish." "I'll see to the horses and bring in the supplies. Take your time. This can't be easy for you." His perception surprised Clara once again. She was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain her guard around this man who seemed to read her so easily. That evening, after a simple meal cobbled together from their supplies, they sat at the kitchen table making plans. Val had a notebook open, making lists of what needed immediate attention. "The fences on the north pasture need mending," Clara told him, "and we should inspect the well pump. It was giving Father trouble before I left." Val nodded, adding these items to his list. "What about livestock? How many head of cattle are left?" "Perhaps 40, down from nearly 100 last year. Father sold most of the herd to cover his debts." "There are also 8 horses, 4 brood mares, 2 yearlings, a stallion, and my mare, Penny." "No hired hands," Clara shook her head. "Father had to let them go, couldn't afford to pay them." Val made more notes. "We'll need to hire at least 2 men if we want to rebuild the herd. And we'll need to purchase more cattle before winter." "With what money?" Clara asked. "We just put most of your savings toward the bank debt." Val looked up, his gray-blue eyes holding hers. I have more set aside, enough to get us started. Clara frowned. How much money do you actually have, Val? Enough, he said simply. I told you I've been working cattle drives for years. A man who doesn't drink, gamble, or visit brothels can save quite a bit. Clara flushed at his frankness. I can't keep accepting your money. This wasn't our arrangement. Our arrangement was that I would help restore the ranch to profitability. That's exactly what I'm doing. Val closed his notebook. Think of it as an investment in our mutual future. But after the year is up, I'll have earned back my investment through my percentage of the profits, as our agreement states. Val interrupted. This is business, Clara, nothing more. Something in his tone made Clara wonder if he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Very well, she conceded, but I want records kept of everything, every penny you invest, every penny of profit. Val's smile was unexpectedly warm. I would expect nothing less from a partner. As Clara prepared for bed that night, she listened to the unfamiliar sounds of Val moving about in her father's room across the hall. It was strange having another presence in the house after so many months alone. When she finally slipped beneath the covers, Clara found herself staring at the ceiling, trying to sort through her conflicted feelings. Valentine Xavier was not the husband she had envisioned when she set out for Montana. He was too observant, too capable, too present. A business arrangement was supposed to be straightforward, unemotional. But there was nothing straightforward about the way her heart had jumped when Val called her partner, or the comfort she'd felt with her head on his shoulder during the journey. It's just gratitude, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Nothing more. But as sleep finally claimed her, Clara couldn't quite convince herself of that truth. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised Clara with its ease. Val rose before dawn each day, tending to the horses and checking the property before breakfast. By the time Clara had coffee brewing, he'd already accomplished more than most men did in half a day. They worked side by side repairing fences, cleaning out the barn, and taking inventory of everything on the property. Val hired 2 local men brothers named Ethan and James Miller to help with the heavier work and the planned expansion of the herd. Clara found herself watching Val when he wasn't looking, noting the confident way he spoke with the Miller brothers, the gentle hands he used with the horses, the thoughtful consideration he showed in all his decisions regarding the ranch. He never mentioned their arrangement, never reminded her of its temporary nature. Instead, he threw himself into the work as if the Parker Ranch was truly his home, his future. One evening, about 3 weeks after their arrival, Clara was preparing supper when Val came in from the fields. He removed his hat and coat, washed his hands at the pump, and then paused to observe what she was cooking. "Smells good," he commented, peering over her shoulder at the stew simmering on the stove. Clara was suddenly aware of how close he stood, the clean scent of soap mingling with the earthy smell that clung to him after a day's work. "It's just rabbit stew," she said, stepping aside to create distance between them. "Nothing special." After trail rations and way station food, home cooking is always special. Val moved to the cabinet, taking down plates and cups with the ease of a man completely at home. "The Miller boys finished the north fence today, and I spoke with Johnson at the general store about those cattle he mentioned." "The ones from the Wilcox place?" Clara asked, ladling stew into bowls. Val nodded, setting the table with practiced efficiency. 20 head, good stock. Price is fair. I told him we'd ride out tomorrow to have a look." Clara hadn't left the ranch since their arrival. "Unless you'd rather not," Val said, his expression carefully neutral. "But you have a better eye for cattle than you give yourself credit for. I've watched you with the existing herd." The casual compliment warmed Clara more than it should have. I suppose I could come along. The mending can wait another day. They ate in companionable silence, broken occasionally by discussions of ranch business. After supper, Val insisted on washing the dishes while Clara dried them, a task her father had never once offered to help with. I received a letter from Mrs. Whitaker today, Clara mentioned as they worked. The elderly woman from the stagecoach had promised to write once she returned from visiting her daughter. How is she? Val asked, handing Clara a clean plate. Well, she asked after my handsome husband and wanted to know if married life agreed with me. Clara focused intently on drying the plate, avoiding Val's eyes. And does it? The question was soft, almost hesitant. Clara glanced up, finding Val's gaze on her, those storm-colored eyes unreadable in the lamplight. It's not what I expected, she admitted. Is that good or bad? I'm not sure yet. Clara set down the plate and reached for a cup. What about you? Does married life agree with you? Val was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in the dishwater. I've never lived in one place for this long before, he said finally. Never had a home to come back to each night. It's different. Different good or different bad? Clara echoed his question. The smile that touched his lips made something flutter in Clara's chest. Different good, I think, though I'm still getting used to having someone waiting for me at the end of the day. The simple honesty in his voice caught Clara off guard. They'd maintained a careful distance these past weeks, both physical and emotional. This brief exchange felt like a crack in the wall between them. Before she could respond, a knock at the door broke the moment. Val's expression closed off as he moved to answer it, hand instinctively checking the placement of his gun. It was Mr. Johnson from the general store, hat in hand. Evening, Mrs. Xavier, Mr. Xavier. Sorry to disturb you so late, but I was passing by and thought I should let you know Wilcox decided to sell those cattle to Thornton instead. Got a better offer. Val frowned. Thornton from over by the river. I thought he was only running sheep these days. He was, but he's expanding. Been buying up cattle all over the county. Johnson twisted his hat nervously. There's something else you should know. There's talk that he's interested in this property too. Been asking questions about your situation, Mrs. Xavier about your father's debts and such. Clara felt a chill run through her. Thomas Thornton has no claim on this land. No, madam, not yet, but he's got money and influence with the bank. Just thought you should be aware. Johnson nodded to them both. I'll be on my way. Good night to you. After he left, Clara turned to Val, worry etched on her face. Thornton was trying to buy this land before father died. He wants to expand his grazing territory. Val's expression had hardened. Then we'll need to be more aggressive about rebuilding the herd and getting the ranch profitable again. If Thornton is deliberately cutting off your cattle options, we'll need to look further afield. That means more money, Clara said, anxiety creeping into her voice. We have money, Val assured her. And now we know what we're up against. Knowledge is its own kind of advantage. Clara studied his face, the determination she saw there giving her courage. You sound like you've dealt with men like Thornton before, men who use money and influence to get what they want. Yes, Val's jaw tightened. And I've learned that the only way to beat them is to be smarter and work harder. And if that's not enough, Clara asked quietly. Val's eyes met hers, a steely resolve in their depths. Then we fight. But I promise you, Clara, Thornton won't get this ranch. Not while I have anything to say about it. In that moment, standing in her family's kitchen with Val's unwavering gaze on her, Clara felt something shift between them. This was no longer just about their arrangement. It had become something more, a shared purpose, a common enemy. And despite herself, despite all her cautions and reservations, Clara was beginning to trust Valentine Xavier with more than just her name. The threat of Thomas Thornton loomed larger over the following weeks. Twice more they attempted to purchase cattle, only to find the sellers had mysteriously changed their minds. Supplies they ordered from neighboring towns arrived late or not at all. Even the Miller brothers reported being approached with offers to work for Thornton instead, offers they had declined out of loyalty to Clara and Val. Throughout it all, Val remained steadfast. When one plan failed, he simply devised another. When traditional cattle markets were closed to them, he sent word to contacts from his days on the cattle drives. When the general store in Silver Springs suddenly couldn't fulfill their orders, Val arranged deliveries from towns further away. Clara watched him with growing admiration. The man she'd first taken for a simple gambler was revealing depths of resourcefulness and determination she hadn't anticipated. He worked from sunrise to well past sunset, his hands becoming more calloused, his skin more weathered, but his resolve never wavering. One evening in late September, Clara found Val at the kitchen table after supper, poring over account books by lamplight. His brow was furrowed in concentration, a pencil tucked behind his ear as he made calculations on a separate sheet of paper. "How bad is it?" Clara asked, setting a cup of coffee beside him. Val looked up, offering a tired smile. "Not as bad as it could be. We've managed to add 30 head to the herd despite Thornton's interference. The repairs to the barn are holding and the new well pump is working fine." "But," Clara prompted, sensing his hesitation. "But we're spending more than planned due to having to source things from further away, and winter's coming. We'll need to lay in more feed than I initially calculated." Clara sat across from him, wrapping her hands around her own coffee cup. "Will we make it to spring?" Val met her gaze directly. "Yes. It'll be tight, but yes." Clara nodded, trusting his assessment. Over these past months, she'd come to rely on Val's honesty above all else. He never sugar-coated difficulties, but neither did he give in to pessimism. "There's something else," Val said, closing the account book. "I received word today that a herd is coming up from Texas next month. The trail boss is an old friend. He's willing to sell us 20 head at a fair price." "That's wonderful news," Clara said, relief washing over her. "There's a catch," Val continued. "I'll need to meet them in Dodge City to secure the deal. It's a 3-day ride each way, plus however long it takes to drive the cattle back." Clara felt a sudden apprehension at the thought of Val being gone for so long. "When would you leave?" "Day after tomorrow, if you can spare me." "Of course," Clara said quickly. "The ranch can't afford to miss this opportunity." Val studied her face. "I don't like leaving you alone with Thornton causing trouble." "I won't be alone. The Miller brothers will be here and Mrs. Miller has offered to stay in the house with me." Clara straightened her shoulders. "Besides, I managed this ranch with my father for years. I'm hardly helpless." A smile touched Val's lips. "No, you're certainly not that." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. "I'll be back as soon as I can." The casual touch sent warmth spiraling through Clara's arm. Such moments had become more frequent between them, a hand at her elbow as they walked to the barn, fingers brushing as they passed tools back and forth, shoulders touching as they sat side by side in the wagon. Each time, Clara told herself it meant nothing. Each time, she found herself lingering in the moment longer than necessary. 2 days later, Clara stood in the yard watching Val prepare for his journey. He had packed lightly just essentials in his saddlebags, and a bedroll tied behind his saddle. The gray stallion he'd purchased shortly after their arrival stomped impatiently, eager to be moving. "Remember to check the south fence line every other day," Val was saying. "Ethan found a weak section yesterday," Clara nodded. "And you remember to send word when you reach Dodge City." "I will." Val checked his cinch one last time, then turned to face her fully. "Clara, if Thornton comes around while I'm gone, I'll be civil but firm," she interrupted. "This is my land and no amount of pressure will change that." Val's expression softened. "That's my girl." The phrase, spoken so casually, caught them both by surprise. For a moment neither spoke, the words hanging in the air between them like a revelation. Then Val cleared his throat. "I should be going. Daylight's wasting." Clara nodded, suddenly unable to find words. As Val mounted his horse, she stepped forward impulsively. "Be careful." Val looked down at her, his gray-blue eyes holding hers. "Always am." Clara didn't know what possessed her to reach up and straighten his bandana, her fingers lingering against the weathered skin of his neck. "Come back safely." Something flickered in Val's eyes, a warmth, an intensity that made Clara's breath catch. For a heartbeat, she thought he might lean down from the saddle and kiss her. Instead, he captured her hand and pressed his lips briefly to her knuckles. "Count on it," he said softly, then released her hand and turned his horse toward the road. Clara stood watching until horse and rider disappeared over the horizon, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it, and her heart beating with a rhythm that had nothing to do with business arrangements. The first 2 days after Val's departure passed uneventfully. Clara threw herself into ranch work, helping the Miller brothers move the cattle to a new pasture and taking inventory of the preserved foods in the cellar for the coming winter. Mrs. Miller, a cheerful woman in her 40s with 5 grown children, came each evening to stay in the house, bringing fresh bread and companionship that Clara appreciated more than she'd expected. On the 3rd day, as Clara was mending a tear in one of Val's shirts, she heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Setting aside her sewing, she went to the window, expecting to see one of the neighbors or perhaps a delivery from town. Instead, she saw a fine black carriage pulled by matched bay horses, with Thomas Thornton himself at the reins. Clara's heart sank. She had hoped to avoid this confrontation until Val returned. Squaring her shoulders, she went to meet her unwelcome visitor on the porch. Thomas Thornton was a large man in his 50s, with thinning red hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who enjoyed his whiskey. He was dressed expensively, his suit and boots speaking of wealth that seemed at odds with the dusty surroundings of a working ranch. "Miss Parker," he called as he climbed down from the carriage. "Or should I say Mrs. Xavier now? I heard you'd gotten yourself hitched." "Mr. Thornton," Clara acknowledged coolly. "What brings you to my property?" Thornton smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Neighborly concern, my dear. I heard your husband was away and I wanted to make sure you were managing all right. As you can see, we're managing just fine." Clara remained on the porch, deliberately not inviting him inside. "Thank you for your concern, but it's unnecessary." Thornton glanced around the property, his gaze assessing. "I see you've made some improvements. New fence posts on the north side, repairs to the barn. Your husband must be a hard worker." "He is," Clara said simply. "Curious thing," Thornton continued, climbing the porch steps uninvited. "No one seems to know much about this Valentine Xavier. Appeared out of nowhere, married you in Montana, then brought you back here. Very convenient." Clara felt a chill at his insinuating tone. "My husband's background is none of your concern, Mr. Thornton." "Perhaps not," Thornton conceded, coming to stand too close for comfort. "But your welfare is. A young woman alone taking on a ranch this size with a stranger as husband. People talk, Mrs. Xavier." "Let them," Clara said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Thornton didn't budge. "I came with a proposition, actually. I'm still interested in purchasing this property. Given your father's debts and the difficulty you've been having acquiring new stock, I thought you might be more amenable now. The ranch isn't for sale." I'm prepared to offer $5,000, Thornton continued as if she hadn't spoken. More than fair, considering the circumstances. You could settle your debts, have plenty left over to start fresh somewhere else. Perhaps somewhere more suited to a lady of your refinement. Clara's anger flared. As I said, Mr. Thornton, the ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. This land has been in my family for 2 generations, and I intend to pass it to a third someday. Thornton's expression hardened. That's assuming you and your mysterious husband managed to keep it. Banking is a precarious business these days. Loans can be called in, terms can change. Are you threatening me? Clara asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Warning you, Thornton corrected. As a concerned neighbor. Things happen to people who don't know when to accept a generous offer. Fences get cut, cattle go missing, barns catch fire. Before Clara could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. The Miller brothers rode into the yard, both carrying rifles across their saddles. Everything all right, Mrs. Xavier? Ethan Miller called, his gaze fixed suspiciously on Thornton. Fine, thank you, Ethan, Clara replied, relief flooding her. Mr. Thornton was just leaving. Thornton's smile returned, though his eyes remained cold. Indeed I was. Think about my offer, Mrs. Xavier. It won't remain open indefinitely. He tipped his hat. Good day to you. As he climbed back into his carriage, Thornton added, Give my regards to your husband when he returns, if he returns. The ominous words hung in the air as he drove away, leaving Clara with a sense of dread that no amount of reassurance from the Miller brothers could dispel. That night, lying alone in her bed, Clara found herself listening for sounds that didn't belong: creaking floorboards, breaking glass, the crackle of flames. Thornton's threats had shaken her more than she wanted to admit, but more than fear, Clara felt anger. This land was her birthright, her legacy. The home where her mother had taught her to read by the fireplace, where her father had shown her how to gentle a frightened colt, where she had dreamed of raising her own family someday. No amount of money could replace those memories or the future she still hoped to build here. And now that future was inexplicably tied to a man she'd married for convenience, a man whose absence felt like a physical ache in her chest. Come home, Val, she whispered into the darkness. Please come home. 5 days after Val's departure, Clara received a telegram from Dodge City confirming his arrival and successful meeting with the trail boss. The cattle purchase had gone through, and they would be starting the drive back within 2 days. The news should have brought relief, but Clara couldn't shake her uneasiness. Thornton had not returned, but strange things had begun happening around the ranch. A section of fence had been found cut, allowing several cattle to wander onto the road. The lock on the barn had been broken, though nothing appeared to be missing. And twice, Clara had spotted riders watching the property from a distant ridge, disappearing when the Miller brothers rode out to investigate. On the 8th day, Clara was in the garden harvesting the last of the season's vegetables when she heard Mrs. Miller call out in alarm from the house. Dropping her basket, Clara ran toward the porch, heart pounding. Black smoke was rising from the direction of the barn. James has gone for help, Mrs. Miller cried, pointing to where the younger Miller brother was riding hard toward town. Ethan's already at the barn. Clara hitched up her skirts and ran, fear giving wings to her feet. The barn housed not only hay and equipment, but also several horses, including her beloved mare Penny. By the time Clara reached the barn, Ethan had already managed to get most of the horses out into the corral. Flames were licking up the eastern wall where the hay was stored, spreading rapidly toward the roof. The water barrel, Clara shouted, grabbing buckets from outside the barn door. Together, she and Ethan formed a bucket brigade, throwing water on the flames while trying to keep the frightened horses from bolting. The fire was spreading faster than they could contain it. Smoke stung Clara's eyes and burned her lungs as she worked desperately to save the structure her grandfather had built with his own hands. "Mrs. Xavier, we need to get back," Ethan shouted over the roar of the flames. "The roof's about to go." Clara looked up to see the wooden beams above them glowing red with heat. "Penny's still inside," she cried, suddenly realizing her mare was missing from the corral. Before Ethan could stop her, Clara dashed back into the burning barn, a wet cloth pressed to her face. The smoke was thick and disorienting, but she could hear Penny's terrified whinnying from her stall at the far end. "Clara." The voice cut through the smoke and roaring flames, a voice Clara would recognize anywhere. Val appeared beside her, his face blackened with soot, his eyes wild with fear and fury. "The roof's coming down," he shouted, grabbing her arm. "We need to get out, Penny," Clara began. "I'll get her," Val promised. "Go, now." Clara hesitated only a moment before turning toward the door. She had barely taken 3 steps when a terrible cracking sound came from above. Looking back, she saw Val diving into Penny's stall as a burning beam crashed down where he had been standing moments before. "Val!" Clara screamed, starting back toward him. Strong arms caught her from behind. Ethan Miller dragged her bodily from the barn just as more of the roof began to collapse. Outside in the yard, Clara fought against Ethan's restraining grip. "Val's still in there. Let me go." "You can't help him by getting yourself killed," Ethan insisted, holding her firmly. Clara watched in horror as the barn roof sagged inward, flames shooting skyward. Smoke billowed from the doorway where she had exited moments before. There was no sign of Val or Penny. Then, just as Clara was about to collapse in despair, movement appeared at the side of the barn. A section of the wall burst outward, and Val emerged, leading a terrified Penny by her halter. His shirt was smoldering, his hair singed, but he was alive. Clara broke free from Ethan's grasp and ran to them, tears streaming down her soot-blackened face. Without thought or hesitation, she threw her arms around Val's neck, burying her face against his chest. "You're alive," she sobbed. "I thought I'd lost you." Val's arms encircled her, holding her tightly against him despite the pain she knew he must be feeling from his burns. "Not a chance," he murmured into her hair. "I promised I'd come back, remember?" Clara pulled back enough to look at his face, her hands framing his smoke-stained cheeks. "How are you here? You shouldn't be back for days yet." A grim smile touched Val's lips. "Got word that Thornton was making threats. Rode ahead of the herd, left the men to bring the cattle on more slowly." His expression darkened as he looked over her shoulder at the collapsing barn. "Seems I didn't ride fast enough." "You're here now," Clara said, her voice breaking. "That's all that matters." Something shifted in Val's eyes, a tenderness mingled with fierce determination. Before Clara could register what was happening, he bent his head and captured her lips with his. The kiss was brief but intense, burning away the last pretense between them as surely as the fire was consuming the barn. When they parted, both were breathing heavily, and not from the smoke. "I need to see to Penny," Val said roughly. "And we need to make sure the fire doesn't spread to the house." Clara nodded, reluctantly stepping back from his embrace. Reality was intruding the burning barn, the gathering neighbors who had seen their kiss, the unspoken change in their relationship that would need to be addressed. But as they worked side by side with the neighbors to contain the fire and tend to the injured horse, Clara felt a certainty settling in her heart. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges they faced, she was no longer facing them alone. Valentine Xavier might have entered her life as a husband in name, but somewhere along the way, he had become much more. The question now was whether he felt the same. In the aftermath of the fire, there was little time for Clara and Val to discuss what had happened between them. The burned-out shell of the barn needed to be cleared away, temporary shelter arranged for the animals, and supplies that had been lost replaced. Val threw himself into these tasks with grim determination, his jaw set in a hard line that Clara had come to recognize as a sign of tightly controlled anger. The only time his expression softened was when he looked at her, those brief glances conveying a tenderness that made her heart race. 3 days after the fire, the cattle Val had purchased arrived, driven by the men he had left behind in Dodge City. The new additions to their herd were healthy and strong, exactly what they needed to rebuild. That evening, with the cattle settled and the hands fed, Clara finally found herself alone with Val in the kitchen. He sat at the table while she tended to the burns on his arms and hands, injuries he had dismissed as minor, but which Clara knew must be painful. "The sheriff believes it was definitely arson," Val said as Clara gently applied salve to a particularly bad burn on his forearm. "Found evidence that coal oil had been splashed on the eastern wall." Clara's hand stilled. "Thornton. Most likely, though proving it will be another matter." Val's free hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Clara, I want you to consider something." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "What? Selling the ranch, taking Thornton's money and starting fresh somewhere else?" Clara jerked back as if he'd slapped her. "What? How can you even suggest such a thing?" Val's expression was grave. "Because I'm concerned about your safety. Thornton's already shown he's willing to destroy property. What if next time it's not the barn but the house? What if you'd been hurt or killed in that fire? So we should just give up." "Let him win." Clara stood, anger flooding through her. "This is my home, Val, my family's legacy. I won't be driven off by threats and intimidation." Val rose as well, his height allowing him to look down into her flushed face. "And I won't risk losing you to prove a point." "Not when there are other options." "It's not about proving a point," Clara insisted. "It's about standing up for what's right, for what's ours." The word hung between them, charged with meaning neither had fully acknowledged until now. Val's voice softened. "Is it ours, Clara? Really? Or is this still just an arrangement to you?" The question stripped away the last of Clara's defenses. "You know it's not," she whispered. "Not anymore." Val stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Then say it. Tell me what this is between us." Clara swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know when it changed," she admitted. "When you became more than just a business partner, when I started watching for you at the end of every day, when I began to worry that our year would end and you would leave." "I'm not leaving," Val said firmly. "Not unless you send me away. And if I asked you to stay, beyond our agreement." Clara hardly dared to breathe as she waited for his answer. Val's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palm. "I think you know the answer to that. Tell me anyway," she insisted. "I need to hear it." Val's eyes held hers, the storm-gray depths revealing a vulnerability she'd rarely glimpsed. "I love you, Clara. I think I've loved you since that day in Montana when you marched up to me in the street and announced you needed a husband." A smile trembled on Clara's lips. "I thought you were the most presumptuous man I'd ever met. And now," Val's thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, "now I think you're the most honorable, the most stubborn, the most infuriating." Clara's voice caught, "and the only man I could ever imagine loving." The words had barely left her lips before Val's mouth was on hers. This kiss, deeper and more lingering than the one they'd shared by the burning barn. Clara wound her arms around his neck, pressing herself against him as if she could dissolve the months of careful distance between them through sheer will. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Val rested his forehead against hers. "I'm still worried about Thornton," he murmured. "We'll face him together," Clara said with new confidence. "This is our home, Val, our ranch, and I'm not giving it up without a fight." Val's smile was slow but determined. "Then neither am I, Mrs. Xavier. Neither am I." The following morning, Clara woke to find Val's side of the bed empty. After their declarations the night before, they had decided to truly share a room for the first time since their marriage. Clara had fallen asleep in Val's arms, more content than she could remember being in years. Now, reaching out to touch the cool sheets where he should have been, she felt a momentary panic. Had he changed his mind? Had last night's revelations been too much, too soon? Then she heard the familiar sound of his boots on the stairs, and relief washed through her. Val appeared in the doorway, fully dressed, with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "Morning," he said, a smile spreading across his face as he took in her tousled appearance. "Thought you might want this." Clara sat up, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You're up early." "Had an idea I wanted to pursue before the day got started." Val sat on the edge of the bed, watching her with a warmth that made Clara's cheeks flush. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted, "until I woke up and you were gone." Val's expression softened. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara. Not without you." She believed him, with a certainty that should have frightened her but instead felt like coming home. "So what's this idea of yours?" Val's expression turned serious. "I think we need to confront Thornton directly. Not just about the fire, but about his intentions toward the ranch." Clara set down her coffee cup. "You want to ride over to his place?" "Actually, I want to invite him here." Val's eyes had a calculating gleam that reminded Clara he hadn't always been a rancher. "On our terms, with witnesses present." "What kind of witnesses?" "The sheriff, for one. And perhaps Mr. Hargrove from the bank, maybe even a few neighbors who have had their own problems with Thornton over the years." Clara considered the suggestion. "A public confrontation where he can't easily threaten or intimidate," Val nodded. "Exactly. Men like Thornton thrive in the shadows. They're less comfortable when forced into the light. And if he refuses to come, then we have the sheriff deliver the invitation personally. Makes it harder for Thornton to claim innocence if he declines." Val took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What do you think?" Clara squeezed his hand. "I think it's worth trying, but let's be prepared for it to go badly." "Always," Val agreed. "I'll ride into town after breakfast to speak with the sheriff. Think you can draft an appropriately formal invitation while I'm gone?" Clara's smile turned mischievous. "Oh, I believe I can manage that." Val leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "That's my girl." This time, the endearment brought only warmth to Clara's heart. 2 days later, Thomas Thornton's carriage once again rolled into the yard of the Parker Ranch, but this time under very different circumstances. Clara and Val stood together on the porch, watching as Thornton climbed down, his expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. He wasn't alone. Sheriff Davis followed on horseback, along with Mr. Hargrove from the bank. Behind them came 3 neighboring ranchers whose properties bordered Thornton's lands, men who had their own grievances with the wealthy landowner. "Quite the welcoming committee, Mrs. Xavier," Thornton called, his voice jovial though his eyes were cold. "Your invitation mentioned a business matter of mutual interest." "Indeed it did, Mr. Thornton," Clara replied evenly. "Please join us inside." The group moved into the house, gathering in the front parlor where Clara had arranged chairs in a semicircle. Val stood beside her chair, a steady presence at her shoulder. "Coffee, Mr. Thornton," Clara offered, every inch the proper hostess despite the tension crackling in the air. "Thank you, no," Thornton declined, looking around at the assembled group. I must say I'm curious about this meeting. It's not often I'm summoned so formally. We wanted to discuss your interest in our property, Val said, his voice level but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Specifically, your recent visit while I was away and the fire that followed shortly after. Thornton's expression hardened. If you're implying what I think you're implying, Xavier, you'd best have proof to back it up. The timing is certainly suspicious, Sheriff Davis interjected. Mrs. Xavier reports you made veiled threats about accidents happening to those who refuse your offers. The very next day, their barn burns down. Coincidence, Thornton scoffed. Half the county knows I've been interested in the Parker place for years. Why would I damage property I want to purchase? To drive down the price, suggested one of the neighboring ranchers, a grizzled man named Peterson. Same tactic you tried with me last spring when my best breeding bull turned up dead. Murmurs of agreement came from the other ranchers, each with similar stories of mysterious misfortunes following Thornton's unsuccessful purchase offers. Thornton's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. You've gathered this lynch mob based on nothing but coincidence and gossip. Actually, Val said quietly, we have a bit more than that. He nodded to Sheriff Davis, who produced a small cloth sack from his pocket. Found this near what's left of the barn, the sheriff explained, emptying the contents onto a small table. A silver pocket watch gleamed in the afternoon light, its case engraved with ornate initials, TT, the color drained from Thornton's face. That could be anyone's. With your initials, Clara asked skeptically. And matching the watch chain I noticed you wearing during your last visit. Thornton's hand went instinctively to his vest pocket, finding it empty. This is preposterous. I could have lost that anywhere, anytime. True, Sheriff Davis agreed, which is why it's not enough for an arrest, but it is enough for questions. Serious questions, Mr. Thornton. Questions that the territorial governor might find interesting, added Mr. Hargrove unexpectedly. All eyes turned to the banker, who had been silent until now. The bank has been reviewing some irregularities in land transactions over the past few years. Your name features prominently, Mr. Thornton. Thornton's expression turned thunderous. Hargrove, you forget who holds the majority of your bank's notes. Not anymore, the banker replied calmly. The bank has secured new investors. Your influence isn't what it once was. Clara and Val exchanged surprised glances. This was an unexpected development, one that potentially changed the balance of power significantly. Thornton looked around the room, his previous confidence evaporating as he realized how isolated he had become. What exactly do you want from me? He demanded, addressing Val and Clara. Val stepped forward. It's simple. We want you to cease all interest in this property. No more offers, no more threats, no more accidents. In return, we won't pursue the matter of the watch any further. And if I refuse? Then the sheriff continues his investigation, Clara said firmly. And Mr. Hargrove's bank looks very closely at all your financial dealings. And our neighbors here share their experiences with the territorial authorities. Thornton's jaw worked as he considered his options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Fine, keep your worthless piece of land. It's hardly worth the trouble you've caused. We'll need that in writing, Val insisted. A legal document renouncing all current and future claims on this property. Thornton glared at him. You're pushing your luck, Xavier. No, Val replied evenly. I'm protecting what's mine. The possessive declaration sent a warm shiver down Clara's spine. This was no longer about their arrangement or even about the ranch itself. This was about the life they were building together. After Thornton had signed the document, Mr. Hargrove hastily drafted and departed with as much dignity as he could muster. The remaining guests lingered briefly to congratulate Clara and Val. When the last of them had gone, Clara turned to her husband with wonder in her eyes. "Did that really just happen? Is it really over?" Val pulled her into his arms. "It's over. Thornton knows when he's beaten, he'll find easier targets elsewhere." "I can hardly believe it," Clara murmured against his chest. "All these months of worry, and now—" "Now we can focus on the future," Val finished for her. "Our future." Clara looked up at him, happiness bubbling through her like spring water. "Our future," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Val's smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "So do I, Mrs. Xavier." "So do I." Winter descended on the Parker Ranch with a ferocity that tested even Val's extensive experience. Snow piled in drifts against the house, and the cattle huddled together in the shelters hastily constructed to replace the burned barn. Clara and Val worked side by side through the short days and long nights, their partnership deepening with each challenge overcome. They celebrated Christmas quietly, exchanging simple gifts before the fireplace. Clara had knitted Val a new scarf, the soft wool matching the gray blue of his eyes. Val had ridden to Silver Springs through a snowstorm to purchase a delicate silver locket he'd noticed Clara admiring months before in the jeweler's window. As Clara fastened it around her neck, Val watched her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "I have something else for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Val, the locket is more than enough," he shook his head, opening his palm to reveal her mother's wedding ring, the one she had given him for their hasty ceremony in Montana, which he had returned to her afterward. "I thought maybe," he said softly, "you might want to wear this again. For real this time." Clara's breath caught. "Are you proposing to me, Valentine Xavier, when we're already married?" A smile quirked the corner of his mouth. "I'm proposing that we stop thinking of this as an arrangement with an expiration date, that we acknowledge what we both already know, that somewhere along the way, this became real." Clara held out her left hand, which had been conspicuously bare all these months. "In that case, yes. I would very much like to wear my mother's ring again, for real this time." As Val slid the ring onto her finger, Clara felt as though a circle was being completed, one that had begun the day she stepped off the stagecoach in Willow Creek, desperate and alone, and found an unexpected ally in a gambling cowboy with storm-colored eyes. "I love you, Clara Xavier," Val said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Clara replied, twining her arms around his neck. "My husband in heart as well as name." Spring came to Kansas with an explosion of new life. The pastures turned green, wildflowers dotted the hillsides, and the expanded herd flourished under Val's careful management. The new barn, larger and sturdier than the original, stood as testament to their resilience. On a warm May evening, Clara sat on the porch watching Val work with a young colt in the corral. His movements were patient and sure, his voice a low murmur as he gentled the nervous animal. Clara's hand rested on her abdomen, where the first subtle swelling of new life was just becoming visible beneath her dress. She hadn't told Val yet. She wanted to be certain before sharing news that would change their lives forever. But watching him now, his innate gentleness evident in every movement, Clara knew he would make a wonderful father. As if sensing her thoughts, Val looked up, meeting her gaze across the yard. His smile was immediate and warm, a private communication that needed no words. He patted the colt's neck and turned him loose in the corral before making his way toward the house. "Penny's foal is coming along nicely," he said, climbing the porch steps and settling beside Clara on the swing. "Got his mother's spirit and his sire's build. He'll make a fine riding horse someday." Clara leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Val, there's something I need to tell you. He glanced down at her, concern instantly replacing contentment. What is it? Are you unwell? No, she assured him quickly. Quite the opposite, in fact. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand more deliberately on her stomach. We're going to have a baby. In late October, the doctor thinks. For a moment, Val simply stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then, with a whoop that startled the birds from a nearby tree, he lifted Clara from the swing and spun her around, his face alight with joy. A baby, he repeated, setting her gently back on her feet. Our baby. Clara laughed at his exuberance, relief washing through her. You're happy, then? Val's hands framed her face with exquisite tenderness. Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Clara, it's everything. You're everything. He kissed her then, pouring all his love and wonder into the embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Val kept his arms around her, his expression turning thoughtful. You know, he said, I've been thinking about the future, about our plans for the ranch. Oh, Clara leaned against him, content in his embrace. I think we should expand, Val continued. Not just cattle, but horses too. Your father was onto something with his quarter-horse breeding program. With your eye for good stock and my experience breaking them, we could build something special. Clara smiled, touched by his inclusion of her father's dream in their plans. I'd like that. And the baby could grow up learning to ride and work with horses, just like I did. Our children, Val corrected gently. I'm hoping for more than one if you're willing. The casual way he spoke of their future together, stretching years and decades ahead, filled Clara with a happiness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. More than willing, she assured him. Though perhaps we should focus on this one first. Val's hand covered hers where it rested on her stomach. Our family, he said softly, on our land, everything I never dared to dream of. As the sun set over the Kansas plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had gone to Montana seeking a husband in name only, a business arrangement to save her legacy. Instead, she had found Valentine Xavier a partner, a lover, a friend, a man who had given her his name and then, unexpectedly, his heart. What are you thinking about? Val asked, his breath warm against her hair. Clara smiled, leaning into his embrace as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I'm thinking that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for. Val's arms tightened around her. Like a gambling cowboy who turns out to be the love of your life. Exactly like that, Clara agreed, turning in his arms to meet his gaze. I set out to find a husband in name, Val Xavier, but you were right all along. About what? He asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. Clara rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. I got one in heart instead. Years later, when their children asked how they had met, Clara and Val would exchange knowing glances, sharing a private smile at the memory of that dusty street in Willow Creek. They would tell of a desperate young woman and a gambling cowboy, of a marriage of convenience that had become so much more, of a love that had survived threats and fire and uncertainty to grow stronger with each passing year. And in the quiet moments when they were alone, Val would sometimes take Clara's hand, tracing the worn gold band that had belonged to her mother, and now symbolized their unexpected journey together. Best business arrangement I ever made, he would tease, his storm-gray eyes still capable of making her heart race after all their years together. And Clara would smile, remembering the frightened woman who had once declared, I need a husband in name, and the cowboy who had promised, you'll have one in heart. He had kept that promise, and every day she thanked whatever fate had brought them together on that Montana street. Their love story had begun as a practical arrangement, but it had blossomed into something neither could have anticipated: a partnership of equals, a family bound by love, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come.